If someone told you that a clumsy blonde could literally bring down a billionaire with a bucket of soapy water, you'd probably laugh. But if they also mentioned that this same blonde would mistake the mansion's owner for a burglar, attack him with a mop, and call him a poorly dressed vagabond, you'd think that only happens in movies. Well, get ready to meet Daisy Miller, the only person in the world capable of turning a simple house cleaning into a comedy of errors that would change 2 lives forever. And Bradley Blackwood? He never imagined that his expensive running shoes and workout clothes would lead him to the biggest embarrassment and the biggest surprise of his life. This is the story of how a wet misunderstanding, a hilarious chase through mansion corridors, and lots of soap managed to make 2 opposites discover that sometimes love arrives in the most unexpected way possible. Hold tight, because you're about to embark on the most fun and slippery romantic adventure you've ever seen. It's a pleasure to have you here. Tell me, where are you hearing this story from? If so, leave your comment at the end. Your opinion is a gift. Thank you so much for participating. Daisy Miller had a special talent for turning simple situations into complete chaos. At 23, she had already been fired from 7 jobs, including an ice cream shop. How does someone manage to set fire to an ice cream machine? A flower shop? Apparently watering plants with energy drinks isn't a good idea. And a bookstore? Don't ask about the incident with the ladder and 500 romance novels. But this time would be different. This time she would manage to keep her cleaning job at Blackwood Mansion for more than a week. "Okay, Daisy," she whispered to herself, pushing the cleaning cart down the marble corridor that seemed to stretch for miles. "You can do this. Just clean, don't touch anything expensive, and definitely don't break anything." She stopped in front of the double doors of the main office, the sacred sanctuary of the mysterious Mr. Blackwood, whom she still hadn't met personally. According to the other employees, he was a cruel and bad-tempered billionaire who fired people just for looking at him wrong. "Perfect," she muttered, grabbing the bucket full of soapy water. "Just my type of boss." What Daisy didn't know was that Bradley Blackwood had decided to do his morning run earlier that day. After a sleepless night reviewing contracts, he was running through the corridors of his own mansion trying to clear his mind. Wearing a faded gray t-shirt, running shorts, and sneakers that had seen better days, he looked more like a college student than a business magnate. Daisy opened the office door and began her epic battle against dust. Everything was going well until she decided to clean the highest shelf. In an impressive display of poor coordination, she climbed onto a swivel chair, stretched her arm with the cleaning cloth, and the chair spun. "Aye!" Daisy screamed, spinning like a human top, trying to balance with the bucket in her hand. It was exactly at that moment that Bradley appeared running down the corridor, sweaty and breathless from his run. He heard the scream coming from his office and, thinking it might be a burglar, ran through the door. What happened next was worthy of a physical comedy movie. Daisy, still spinning in the chair, saw an unknown figure invading the office. Without thinking twice, she did the only logical thing that came to mind. She threw the bucket of soapy water in the direction of the intruder. The bucket flew through the air in slow motion. Bradley, still processing the scene of the blonde spinning in the chair like a human carousel, didn't have time to dodge. Splash! The soapy water hit him full force, soaking him from head to toe. The impact was so strong that he slipped on the wet floor and fell backwards, making a noise that echoed throughout the mansion. "Oh my God!" Daisy screamed, finally managing to stop the chair. "I killed the burglar!" She jumped off the chair, obviously slipping in the process and almost falling too, and ran to where Bradley was lying on the floor, soaked and dazed. "No, no, no," she muttered, kneeling beside him. "Please don't die. I can't go to prison. I barely managed to finish high school." Bradley blinked several times, trying to process what had happened. There was an angelic blonde leaning over him, with drops of water dripping from her golden hair, blue eyes wide with concern, and was she talking to him? "And I promise I'll share my food in prison with you if you don't die." Daisy continued her panic monologue. "I mean, if ghosts eat." "Do you eat? As a ghost, I mean." I'm not dead," Bradley managed to say, his voice hoarse. Daisy stopped talking and stared at him. Are you sure? Because you're very pale. And wet. Very wet. Pretty sure, he replied, trying to sit up. That's when he realized he was completely soaked, and there was a puddle of soapy water around them. Oh! Daisy exclaimed, as if she had just realized something obvious. You're not a burglar, are you? Bradley looked at his own soaked clothes, and then at her. What clue led you to that brilliant conclusion? Well, you're not carrying a bag with a dollar sign drawn on it, she replied, completely serious. And you're also not wearing a striped mask. Everyone knows burglars wear striped shirts. Despite the absurd situation, Bradley felt a smile threatening to escape. Ah, of course. And where exactly did you learn about burglars' dress code? Cartoons, Daisy replied proudly. They're very educational. Bradley couldn't contain his laughter. There he was, soaked on the floor of his own office, talking about cartoon criminology with the most disaster-prone and possibly most adorable cleaning lady he had ever met. And you are? He asked, trying to get up and immediately slipping again. Careful, Daisy screamed, trying to help him. In the process, she also slipped and fell on top of him. For a moment, they stayed there, she lying on top of him, faces inches apart, both soaked and surrounded by soapy water. Daisy could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the cleaning soap. Bradley could see small drops of water trapped in her eyelashes. Hi, she whispered, suddenly shy. Hi, he replied, his voice lower than intended. That's when Marcus, the security guard, appeared at the door running. Mr. Blackwood, we heard a noise and… Marcus stopped, processing the scene. His billionaire boss was on the floor, soaked, with a blonde cleaning lady on top of him, surrounded by soapy water. Sir, Marcus shouted, thinking Bradley was being attacked. Daisy turned her head toward the voice and paled. Mr. Blackwood? She looked down at the wet man underneath her, then at Marcus, then back at Bradley. You're Mr. Blackwood? She asked in a horrified whisper. Guilty, Bradley replied, still with that amused smile. The cruel and bad-tempered billionaire? Some would say just billionaire. The owner of this mansion? Unless I lost a very high bet last night. Daisy closed her eyes tightly. I threw soapy water at my boss. Technically, you attacked me with a bucket. I attacked you with a bucket, and then fell on top of me, and then fell on top of you. She opened her eyes. I'm fired, aren't I? Bradley looked at that adorable and disaster-prone creature who had managed, in less than 10 minutes, to turn his world upside down. Literally. Daisy Miller, he said slowly. How do you know my name? It's on your ID. He pointed to the badge hanging on her uniform. Oh, right. She bit her lip. So, fired? Bradley thought for a moment. In all his life, no one had managed to make him laugh on a Monday morning. No one had been so genuinely funny without even trying, and definitely no one had managed to make him completely forget about his work problems. Actually, he said, I think you just earned yourself a promotion. 24 hours after the Great Bucket incident, as it was now being whispered about throughout Blackwood Mansion, Daisy Miller found herself sitting in the most intimidating boardroom she had ever seen. The mahogany table was so shiny she could see her reflection, and the leather chairs probably cost more than her entire annual salary. So let me get this straight, she said, staring at Bradley across the enormous table. He had traded his soaked workout clothes for a perfectly tailored navy suit that made his green eyes look even more striking. You want me to be your personal assistant? That's correct, Bradley replied, trying not to smile at the way she was gripping the edge of the table like it might fly away. After their wet encounter yesterday, he'd spent the entire night thinking about her genuine laughter and the way she'd looked at him like he was just a person, not a bank account with legs. But I don't know anything about being a personal assistant, Daisy protested. I barely know how to work my own phone. Yesterday I tried to answer a text message and somehow ordered 15 pizzas. 15? Bradley raised an eyebrow. The delivery guy was very confused. But hey, free lunch for the cleaning crew. She shrugged, completely missing his amused expression. Mr. Blackwood, I think you're making a huge mistake. I'm not smart like those fancy business ladies with their briefcases and their business things. Bradley leaned forward. There was something absolutely enchanting about her complete honesty. In his world, everyone wanted something from him. Everyone had an angle. But Daisy? She was actually trying to talk him out of giving her a better job. What if I told you the position comes with a significant salary increase? He asked. Daisy's eyes widened. How significant? Triple your current salary. She blinked, then blinked again, then started counting on her fingers under the table. That's... She started calculating out loud. Carry the 1, multiply by... Oh my God, that's enough money to fix my car and buy groceries in the same month. Bradley couldn't help but laugh. I take it that's a yes? Are you kidding? Yes! Daisy jumped up so enthusiastically that she knocked over her chair. In trying to catch it, she bumped into the side table, sending a very expensive-looking vase wobbling dangerously. Oh no, oh no, oh no! She lunged for the vase, caught it, but in the process knocked over a stack of important-looking documents that scattered across the floor like confetti. Bradley watched this chain reaction of chaos with growing amusement. Any other person would be mortified, but Daisy was on her hands and knees, trying to gather the papers while simultaneously apologizing to them. I'm so sorry. Important documents. I didn't mean to mess up your neat little stack. Daisy, Bradley said gently, getting up from his chair. Please don't fire me before I've even started, she continued, not hearing him. I promise I'll be more careful. I'll walk in slow motion if I have to. Daisy, he repeated, walking around the table toward her. Maybe I could wear bubble wrap, or those inflatable sumo wrestler costumes. That way if I bump into anything, it'll just bounce. Daisy! Bradley said louder, crouching down beside her. She finally looked up, her cheeks pink with embarrassment, her blonde hair slightly messed up from crawling around on the floor. She was holding a crumpled contract against her chest like a shield. I'm a disaster, aren't I? She whispered. Bradley found himself studying her face, the way her nose crinkled when she was worried, the little freckle just above her left eyebrow, the genuine concern in her blue eyes. Without thinking, he reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You're perfect, he said softly, and immediately wondered where those words had come from. They stayed like that for a moment, kneeling on the boardroom floor surrounded by scattered papers, looking into each other's eyes. Daisy felt her heart do something weird and fluttery, while Bradley realized he was in serious trouble because he'd never wanted to kiss someone more in his entire life. The moment was interrupted by Marcus clearing his throat loudly from the doorway. Sir, your 10 a.m. appointment is here. Bradley and Daisy scrambled to their feet like teenagers caught kissing behind the school bleachers. Daisy immediately tripped over her own feet, and Bradley automatically reached out to steady her, his hands landing on her waist. Thank you, she breathed, looking up at him. They were standing impossibly close now, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her think of cozy fireplaces and warm blankets. No problem, he murmured, his hands still on her waist, not seeming to want to let go. Marcus cleared his throat again, louder this time. Right. Bradley dropped his hands and stepped back. Marcus, please show my appointment to the smaller conference room. Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. Yes, sir. Marcus left, but not before giving Daisy a look that clearly said, What kind of spell did you put on my boss? So, Daisy said, smoothing down her hair and trying to look professional. When do I start this new job? How about right now? Bradley suggested. Your first task is to help me organize these contracts. Organize contracts? Daisy repeated, looking down at the scattered papers. Like, alphabetically? That's one way to do it. Or by size. I'm very good at organizing things by size. I organized my entire sock drawer by size last week. The tiny ankle socks were adorable lined up next to the big fuzzy ones. Daisy? Yes? You're rambling. I ramble when I'm nervous, she admitted, or excited, or confused, or hungry. Actually, I ramble a lot. Bradley grinned. I'm starting to notice that. They spent the next hour organizing contracts, during which Daisy managed to paper-cut herself on a merger agreement. Who knew paper could be so aggressive? Accidentally sort half the documents by the color of the letterhead instead of date. Get distracted by a contract with a company called Fuzzy Bear Industries and spend 10 minutes wondering if they actually made fuzzy bears. Somehow get her bracelet tangled in the paper shredder. Thankfully, it was turned off. But she also managed to notice a calculation error in one of the contracts that could have cost the company thousands, suggest a more efficient filing system that actually made sense. Make Bradley laugh more in 1 hour than he had in the past month. Look absolutely adorable when she concentrated, biting her lower lip and scrunching her nose. You know what? Bradley said as they finished organizing the last pile. I think you're going to be the best assistant I've ever had. Really? Daisy beamed. Even though I tried to shred my jewelry? Especially because of that. Their eyes met again, and there was that fluttery feeling in Daisy's stomach, like 1,000 butterflies decided to throw a dance party. Bradley felt it too, this strange lightness in his chest, like he'd been holding his breath for years and could finally breathe again. Mr. Blackwood? Daisy said quietly. Yes? Thank you for giving me a chance. Most people would have fired me after yesterday. Most people don't know what they're missing, he replied, his voice warmer than he intended. Before either of them could say anything else, Daisy's stomach let out a growl so loud it could have been mistaken for a small earthquake. Oh my God, she gasped, pressing her hands to her stomach. I'm so sorry. I forgot to eat breakfast this morning because I was so nervous about coming back to work and... How about lunch? Bradley interrupted, checking his watch. It's almost noon. Lunch? Daisy repeated, as if he'd suggested they fly to the moon. You know, that meal between breakfast and dinner usually involves food? I know what lunch is, she protested, then paused. Are you asking me to have lunch with you? I am. Like, together? That's generally how lunch works. But you're my boss, and I'm just... me. Bradley stood up and walked around the desk until he was standing right in front of her. Daisy Miller, would you like to have lunch with me? She looked up at him, her heart doing that weird fluttery thing again. Okay, she whispered. But I should probably warn you, I have a tendency to spill things. I'll take my chances, he said with a smile that made her knees feel like jelly. As they walked toward the door, Daisy couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, her disaster-prone life was finally taking a turn for the better. She had no idea that in 3 hours, she would accidentally book Bradley on a flight to Tokyo instead of Toronto, somehow flood the executive bathroom, and start what would later be known as the Great Stapler Incident of 2025. But she also had no idea that Bradley was already planning to ask her to dinner tomorrow night. Some disasters, after all, lead to the most beautiful discoveries. 3 days into her new job as Bradley's personal assistant, Daisy had already achieved legendary status among the mansion staff. The Great Stapler Incident, involving 17 staplers, a chandelier, and somehow a flock of confused pigeons, had made even the stoic housekeeping staff crack smiles. The Tokyo-Toronto mix-up had resulted in Bradley accidentally attending a sushi convention instead of a board meeting, which he later admitted was the most fun he'd had in years. But it was Thursday evening, and Daisy was facing her biggest challenge yet. Bradley had asked her to dinner. Not a working dinner, not a let's discuss your progress dinner. An actual, honest-to-goodness, romantic dinner. And she was absolutely terrified. Okay, Daisy, she whispered to her reflection in the mansion's guest bathroom mirror. You can do this. It's just dinner. People eat dinner all the time. You eat dinner all the time. Well, usually cereal, but that's beside the point. She had borrowed a dress from her roommate, Luna, a simple black number that was supposed to be foolproof according to Luna's extensive dating experience. What Luna hadn't mentioned was that the dress was designed for someone 5 inches taller, so Daisy had spent the afternoon attempting to hem it with duct tape. Fashionable and practical, she muttered, checking that the tape wasn't visible. Luna would be proud. Meanwhile, in his own suite, Bradley was having his own crisis. He'd changed clothes 4 times, which was approximately 4 times more than he'd ever worried about his appearance for any woman. His usual confidence had been replaced by an unfamiliar nervousness that made him feel like a teenager asking someone to prom. "Get it together, Blackwood," he told himself, adjusting his tie for the 6th time. "You've negotiated billion-dollar deals. You can handle dinner with your assistant." But as he said it, he realized that was exactly the problem. Somewhere over the past few days, Daisy had stopped being just his assistant and had become something else. Something that made his heart race every time she laughed at her own mistakes, or when she got that little crinkle between her eyebrows when she concentrated. At exactly 7 o'clock, Bradley knocked on the guest room door where Daisy had been getting ready. "Just a minute," came her muffled voice, followed by what sounded like furniture being moved, and possibly a small explosion. The door finally opened, and Bradley's breath caught. Despite the slightly lopsided hem held up with duct tape, which he pretended not to notice, Daisy looked absolutely stunning. Her blonde hair was swept up in a messy bun with tendrils framing her face, and she'd managed to apply makeup without any major disasters. "Hi," she said breathlessly, gripping the doorframe. "I'm ready. Well, mostly ready. I couldn't figure out how to work the fancy zipper, so I safety pinned it. But Luna says safety pins are very punk rock, so—" "You look beautiful," Bradley interrupted, meaning every word. Daisy blushed, a pretty pink that matched her lipstick. "Really? Because I was worried the duct tape might be a fashion faux pas." "What duct tape?" Bradley lied gallantly, offering her his arm. They walked through the mansion toward Bradley's private dining room, which had been set up with candles, soft music, and the finest china. Daisy's eyes widened as she took in the romantic scene. "Wow," she breathed. This is really fancy. Are you sure you didn't mean to invite someone else? Like someone who knows which fork to use for salad?" "There are salad forks?" Bradley asked, feigning confusion. "There are salad forks, dessert forks, fish forks, and probably forks I don't even know about," Daisy said seriously. "Rich people have a lot of forks." Bradley laughed, pulling out her chair. "I promise to help you navigate the fork situation." As Daisy sat down, she managed to catch her safety-pinned hem on the chair leg. There was a small ripping sound, and she froze. "Did my dress just break up with me?" she asked in horror. "I didn't hear anything," Bradley said quickly, helping her scoot the chair in. "And even if I did, I happen to think safety pins are very avant-garde." Their first course arrived, a delicate soup that Daisy eyed suspiciously. "It's butternut squash," Bradley explained. "It's very orange," Daisy observed. "I like orange. Orange is a happy color. Do you think food tastes like its color? Because this should taste like happiness and Halloween." Bradley watched, enchanted, as she took a tentative sip, made a surprised face, then immediately took a larger spoonful. "This is amazing," she declared. "It does taste like happiness. Creamy, sophisticated happiness. I'm glad you approve. I was expecting it to taste like pumpkin pie, but this is way better." Although, to be fair, I once tried to make pumpkin pie and somehow ended up with what Luna called orange concrete. So my expectations for orange food are pretty low. They talked easily through the soup course, with Daisy telling increasingly ridiculous stories about her previous job disasters. The great yogurt explosion of 2023 was really not my fault. Who knew frozen yogurt machines were so temperamental? And Bradley finding himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone about growing up. Wealthy, but lonely. The main course arrived, perfectly cooked salmon with asparagus and some kind of fancy potato thing that Daisy couldn't pronounce but declared absolutely magnificent. "Can I ask you something?" Daisy said, carefully cutting her salmon with surgical precision, determined not to fling it across the room. "Anything." Why did you really give me this job? And don't say it's because I attacked you with a bucket, because that seems like grounds for firing, not promoting." Bradley set down his fork, considering his answer. "Do you want the truth?" "Always. Because in 32 years, you're the first person who's looked at me and seen just me. Not my bank account, not my company, not what I could do for them. Just me." Daisy stared at him, her fork halfway to her mouth. "That's really sad." "Is it? Bradley, you're funny and smart and kind, and you laugh at my terrible jokes even when they're not actually funny. If people can't see that, they're idiots." Something shifted in Bradley's chest. The way she said his name, like it was something precious, made him want to reach across the table and, "Oh no," Daisy said suddenly, looking down at her plate. "What's wrong?" "I think I've been eating the garnish this whole time." She held up her fork, which had a sprig of parsley on it. "Is parsley supposed to be crunchy? Because I've eaten like 6 pieces thinking it was some kind of fancy green vegetable." Bradley burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a real, delighted laugh that filled the dining room. "It's not funny," Daisy protested, but she was fighting a smile. "I probably violated some rich people eating rule. You're supposed to ignore the garnish, aren't you? It's like decorative food." "Daisy," Bradley said, still laughing, "you are absolutely perfect." Their eyes met across the table, and suddenly the air felt charged with something electric. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on their faces, and Daisy felt her heart do that fluttery thing again, except stronger this time. "Bradley," she said softly. "Yes? I really like you. I really like you too." They leaned toward each other across the table, the moment building like a crescendo in a romantic movie. Bradley reached across to cup her face. Daisy's eyes fluttered closed, and crash! Daisy's elbow hit her water glass, sending ice water cascading across the table and straight into Bradley's lap. "Oh my God!" Daisy jumped up, knocking over her chair in the process. "I'm so sorry! I'm so sorry!" She grabbed her napkin and, without thinking, reached across the table to try to help clean up the water, accidentally knocking over the candle in the center of the table. "Fire!" she shrieked, as the candle rolled toward the edge. "Fire!" Bradley caught the candle before it could cause any real damage, but not before Daisy had grabbed the water pitcher and doused the entire table, including the remaining food, in an attempt to prevent a catastrophe. They stood there for a moment, dripping and staring at the soggy disaster that had been their romantic dinner. Daisy started, her voice small. "I think I ruined dinner." Bradley looked at her, hair escaping from her bun, makeup slightly smudged, safety pin glinting in the candlelight, standing in a puddle of water with a look of absolute mortification on her face. "Daisy Miller," he said, walking around the table toward her. I know. I'm a disaster. You can fire me now, I understand. I'll just go pack my things and—" He reached her, and without hesitation, cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and tasted like butternut squash soup and new beginnings. Daisy melted into him, her hands fisting in his wet shirt, all thoughts of the ruined dinner forgotten. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Daisy stared up at him with wide eyes. "Wow," she whispered. "Wow," he agreed. "So, I'm not fired." Bradley grinned, pressing his forehead against hers. "Not even close." "Good," she breathed. "Because I really want to do that again." The kissing or the dinner disaster? Definitely the kissing. Maybe skip the water throwing next time. As Bradley kissed her again, both of them dripping wet and surrounded by the ruins of their fancy dinner, he realized that this was exactly what his life had been missing. Beautiful, chaotic, perfect disaster. And Daisy realized that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found someone who loved her not despite her disasters, but because of them. 2 weeks after their water-soaked first kiss, Daisy and Bradley had fallen into a rhythm that was equal parts professional chaos and romantic bliss. Their days were filled with business meetings where Daisy would accidentally order lunch for 40 people instead of 4, and their evenings were spent talking for hours, sharing stories, and stealing kisses in empty hallways like teenagers. But on this particular Monday morning, reality came knocking in the form of Victoria Sterling Ashworth, Bradley's ex-fiancée and the heir to a steel empire. Daisy was in Bradley's office, attempting to organize his calendar while simultaneously trying to figure out why his computer kept making angry beeping sounds when the office doors burst open with the force of a hurricane. "Bradley, darling." A woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine glided into the room. She was tall, elegant, with perfectly styled auburn hair and wearing what Daisy was pretty sure cost more than her entire wardrobe. This was clearly someone who had never eaten garnish by mistake or gotten her jewelry stuck in office equipment. "We simply must talk about the Hamptons' house for the charity gala." Victoria stopped mid-sentence when she spotted Daisy behind the desk, looking like a deer caught in very expensive headlights. "Oh," Victoria said, her voice dropping several degrees. "I wasn't aware you had help in here." Bradley, who had been on a conference call, quickly ended his conversation. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I told you, darling, the charity gala. Your mother specifically requested that I coordinate with you." Victoria's eyes never left Daisy, who was still frozen behind the computer. "Though I see you've been busy." Daisy felt herself shrinking under Victoria's scrutinizing gaze. Everything about this woman screamed sophistication and belonging in Bradley's world. She probably knew which fork to use for every course and had never accidentally flooded a bathroom in her life. "Victoria, this is Daisy Miller, my personal assistant," Bradley said, his voice carefully neutral. "Daisy, this is Victoria Sterling Ashworth." "Hi," Daisy said with forced brightness, standing up so quickly she knocked over her coffee mug. Brown liquid spread across the desk, narrowly missing important documents. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." She grabbed tissues and started frantically dabbing at the mess, accidentally knocking over a pen holder in the process. Pens scattered across the floor like confetti. Victoria watched this display with barely concealed horror. "How charming. I'll just clean this up," Daisy mumbled, getting on her hands and knees to collect the pens. From this position, she couldn't help but overhear Victoria's next words. "Bradley, could we speak privately about the arrangements?" "Of course," Bradley replied, though he was watching Daisy with concern. "Daisy, why don't you take a break, get some fresh air?" The dismissal stung more than Daisy expected. She gathered the pens with as much dignity as she could muster, which wasn't much considering she was still on the floor. "Sure," she said, standing and smoothing down her skirt. "I'll just go air myself." She practically fled from the office, missing the way Bradley's eyes followed her with regret. Outside in the hallway, Daisy leaned against the wall and tried to catch her breath. Through the office's glass doors, she could see Victoria moving around Bradley's space like she owned it, touching things with familiarity, standing close enough to touch his arm while she talked. "That's his ex-fiancée," said a voice behind her. Daisy turned to find Margaret, one of the older housekeeping staff, approaching with a sympathetic look. "Ex-fiancée?" Daisy repeated, her heart sinking. "Oh yes, dear. They were engaged for 2 years. Called it off about 6 months ago, though nobody knows exactly why. She's from his world, you know. Old money, proper breeding, went to all the right schools." Margaret studied Daisy's face. "You didn't know?" Daisy shook her head, feeling foolish. Of course Bradley had a past. Of course he'd been engaged to someone perfect and sophisticated. Someone who probably never spilled coffee or confused Tokyo with Toronto. "She's very beautiful," Daisy said quietly. "Beauty isn't everything, dear," Margaret said kindly. "I've been working in this house for 15 years, and I've never seen Mr. Bradley smile the way he does when you're around." But as Daisy watched Victoria laugh at something Bradley said, touching his shoulder with casual intimacy, Margaret's words felt like cold comfort. Inside the office, Victoria was indeed making herself at home. "Really, Bradley, I don't know what you were thinking," she said, perching on the edge of his desk. A cleaning girl? As your personal assistant? Daisy is very capable, Bradley replied coolly. Darling, she just knocked over half your office trying to say hello. Victoria moved closer. You know this little rebellion phase of yours is amusing, but eventually you'll need to think practically. The board, your mother, society, they expect certain standards. Since when do you care about what other people expect? Victoria's laugh was like silver bells. Pretty, but cold. Since always, darling. It's how our world works. You can't seriously be considering… what? A relationship with the help? Bradley's jaw tightened. Careful, Victoria. I'm being realistic. Bradley, we both know you're going through something. First you break off our engagement for some vague notion about finding yourself. And now you're playing house with a girl who probably doesn't know the difference between a stock option and a stock pot. Our engagement ended because we both knew it was wrong, Bradley said firmly. Did we? Or did you just get cold feet about commitment? Victoria stood and moved around the desk toward him. Bradley, we're perfect together. We understand each other's worlds. Our families approve. We want the same things. Do we? Bradley interrupted. Because I'm starting to think I don't know what I want anymore. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Exactly my point. You're confused. But this little infatuation will pass, and when it does, I'll be here. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, just as Daisy appeared in the doorway with coffee for everyone, a peace offering she'd hoped might smooth over her earlier clumsiness. The sight of Victoria kissing Bradley hit Daisy like a physical blow. The coffee tray slipped from her hands, sending 3 mugs crashing to the floor in a spectacular display of ceramic destruction and hot liquid. Oh! Victoria gasped, jumping back from the mess. My shoes! I'm sorry, Daisy cried, immediately dropping to clean up the disaster. I'm so sorry. I'll replace your shoes. These are Louboutins, Victoria snapped. They cost more than you make in a month. The words hung in the air like a slap. Daisy froze, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She looked up at Bradley, hoping for… what? Defense? Support? But he looked torn, caught between 2 worlds. Victoria, he said quietly, that was unnecessary. Was it? I'm simply pointing out reality, Bradley. This is exactly what I mean about standards. Daisy stood slowly, her hands shaking. She looked at Bradley, really looked at him, and saw something that broke her heart. Uncertainty. Like he was seeing her through Victoria's eyes and suddenly questioning everything. I'll get someone to clean this up, Daisy said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I'll research shoe repair services for Ms. Sterling Ashworth. She turned to leave, but Bradley's voice stopped her. Daisy, wait. She paused at the door, not turning around. It's okay, Mr. Blackwood. I understand. The formal address hit Bradley like a punch to the gut. When had she stopped calling him Bradley? After Daisy left, Victoria shook her head sympathetically. Poor thing. She's clearly developed feelings for you. It's really quite sad. But Bradley was staring at the door where Daisy had disappeared, replaying the hurt in her eyes, the way her shoulders had sagged with defeat. I should go after her, he said. And say what? Bradley, be realistic. What kind of future could you possibly have with someone like her? She doesn't fit into your world, and she never will. Bradley turned to face Victoria, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. Beautiful, polished, perfect, and absolutely wrong for him. You're right, he said quietly. Victoria smiled triumphantly. She doesn't fit into my world, Bradley continued. She's too genuine, too kind, too real. My world is full of people like us, Victoria. People who say cruel things about shoes and judge others for not knowing which fork to use. Maybe it's not her that doesn't fit. Maybe it's my world that's wrong. Victoria's smile faltered. Bradley, I think you should leave, he said firmly. And Victoria, don't come back unless you're invited. Meanwhile, Daisy had retreated to the mansion's garden, sitting on a stone bench among the roses, finally letting the tears fall. She'd been fooling herself, thinking she could belong in Bradley's world. Victoria was right. They were from different universes. She was so lost in her misery that she didn't hear footsteps on the gravel path until a familiar voice said her name. Daisy. She looked up to find Bradley standing there, his tie loosened, hair slightly messed like he'd been running his hands through it. "I told Victoria to leave," he said. "You didn't have to do that for me," Daisy replied, wiping her eyes. "She's right, you know, about everything." "Is she?" "Bradley, look at me. Really look." Daisy stood up, gesturing to herself. "I spill things, I break things. I don't know which fork to use. I'll never fit into your world." Bradley stepped closer. "Then maybe I need to find a new world." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, reaching for her hands, "that I'd rather have coffee disasters and accidentally eat garnish with you than have perfect dinners with anyone else. It means that you make me laugh, you make me think, and you make me want to be better than I am." "But Victoria represents everything I thought I wanted and everything I'm tired of. Daisy, you're not a mistake or a phase or a rebellion. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Daisy searched his eyes, looking for uncertainty, for doubt. Instead, she found only sincerity and something that looked a lot like love. "Even if I never learned to use the right fork?" she asked. "I'll teach you," he said, pulling her closer. "And you can teach me how to laugh at myself when I mess up." "I'm very good at that," she admitted. "I know," he said, kissing her forehead. "It's one of the many things I love about you." The word love hung between them, new and precious and terrifying. But as Bradley kissed her properly, surrounded by roses and the promise of something real, Daisy thought that maybe, just maybe, love was worth fighting for, even when it didn't make sense to anyone else. 3 weeks after the Victoria incident, Daisy and Bradley's relationship had grown stronger than ever. They'd found their rhythm, him teaching her about wine pairings, which mostly involved Daisy making faces at expensive bottles and declaring them fancy grape juice, and her teaching him how to laugh when his perfectly planned meetings went sideways due to her creative interpretations of his schedule. But their biggest test was about to arrive in the form of Evelyn Blackwood, Bradley's formidable mother and the undisputed queen of New York high society. "She's coming to inspect the charity gala preparations," Bradley explained as they walked through the mansion's ballroom, which was being transformed for the annual Blackwood Foundation fundraiser. "And by inspect, I mean she's coming to make sure everything meets her impossibly high standards." Daisy watched nervously as workers hung crystal chandeliers and arranged flowers that probably cost more than her car. "And I'll be helping coordinate this?" "You'll be magnificent," Bradley assured her, though he looked slightly nervous himself. "Just maybe don't mention the time you accidentally ordered ice sculptures of farm animals instead of swans." "That was one time, and honestly the pig was very artistic." Bradley grinned and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you, disaster and all." They'd been saying "I love you" for a week now, and it still made Daisy's heart do backflips every time. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Even if your mother is going to hate me." "She won't hate you," Bradley said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. That afternoon, Evelyn Blackwood arrived like a force of nature. She was elegant and imposing, with silver hair perfectly styled and wearing a Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Everything about her screamed old money and higher expectations. "Bradley, darling," she said, air-kissing his cheeks with practiced precision. "The ballroom looks adequate, though I'm not sure about those centerpieces. Are those peonies?" "I specifically requested roses." "Mother, I'd like you to meet Daisy Miller, my personal assistant," Bradley said, his hand finding Daisy's back supportively. Daisy stepped forward with her brightest smile. "Mrs. Blackwood, it's such an honor to meet you. Bradley talks about you all the time, and I've been so excited to—" In her enthusiasm, Daisy gestured widely and knocked over a small side table displaying sample menu cards. The cards scattered across the marble floor like oversized confetti. "Oh no," Daisy gasped, immediately dropping to collect them. "I'm so sorry. I'm like a bull in a china shop, except clumsier." Evelyn watched this display with the expression of someone observing an alien species. "How energetic." Bradley quickly helped Daisy gather the cards, shooting his mother a warning look. "Daisy has been invaluable in organizing this event." "Has she?" Evelyn's tone could have frozen champagne. "How wonderful." The next few hours were a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Evelyn found fault with everything. The flower arrangements were pedestrian, the lighting was harsh, and the menu was uninspired. But her sharpest critiques were reserved for Daisy. When Daisy suggested they might need more vegetarian options, "Some people don't eat meat and we should be inclusive," Evelyn replied, "How progressive of you, dear." When Daisy accidentally called the ice sculpture artist by the wrong name, Evelyn observed, "Attention to detail is so important in these affairs." And when Daisy spilled wine on the sample tablecloth while trying to demonstrate how the servers should pour, Evelyn simply said, "Indeed." Each comment was delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes, and Daisy felt herself shrinking with every interaction. The breaking point came during the final walkthrough. Daisy, trying to be helpful, suggested they move one of the auction display tables to create better flow for the guests. "Oh, sweetheart," Evelyn said with saccharine sweetness, "perhaps we should leave the planning to those with experience in these matters." "Mother," Bradley's voice carried a warning, "I'm simply saying that charity galas require a certain finesse, an understanding of our donors' expectations." Evelyn's smile was sharp as glass. "Not everyone can navigate these waters." Daisy felt the words like physical blows. She looked around the ballroom, at the opulent decorations, the perfectly dressed staff, the world of wealth and privilege that she'd been trying so hard to fit into. "You're absolutely right," Daisy said quietly. "I should probably go check on something else." She walked away quickly, missing the furious look Bradley shot his mother. Daisy found herself in the mansion's library, a quiet sanctuary lined with leather-bound books that probably cost more than her education. She was sitting in a window seat, trying not to cry, when she heard voices in the hallway. "Really, Bradley, what are you thinking?" Evelyn's voice carried clearly through the door. "That girl is sweet, I'm sure, but she's completely inappropriate for our world." "Inappropriate how?" Bradley's voice was dangerously low. "Darling, be realistic. She spills things, she doesn't understand basic etiquette, and she clearly comes from modest circumstances. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think." "Well, you should. The Blackwood name means something. Your father built this empire, and someday you'll need to pass it on to your children. Do you really want them raised by someone who thinks peonies and roses are interchangeable?" Daisy's hand flew to her mouth. She hadn't known there was a difference between peonies and roses. They were both pretty flowers to her. "That's enough," Bradley said firmly. "I know you think you love her," Evelyn continued, "but love isn't enough. Marriage is about partnership, about building something together. What can she possibly bring to your life besides chaos?" Daisy didn't wait to hear Bradley's response. She'd heard enough. She slipped out of the library through the side door and found herself in the garden, where Bradley had first told her he loved her. But now, surrounded by roses she couldn't distinguish from peonies, all she could think about were Evelyn's words. What could she bring to Bradley's life besides chaos? The honest answer was, nothing. She couldn't help him navigate high society. She didn't understand business or politics or the complex world he lived in. She was just a girl from a small town who'd fallen in love with a man from a different universe. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear footsteps until Bradley's voice said her name. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Daisy turned, and Bradley immediately saw the tears she'd been trying to hide. "You heard," he said, his jaw tightening. "She's not wrong," Daisy said, wiping her eyes. "I don't belong in your world, Bradley. I don't know the difference between peonies and roses. I can't navigate a charity gala without spilling wine. And I definitely can't give you the kind of life your mother wants for you." "I don't want the life my mother wants for me," Bradley said fiercely, reaching for her hands. "I want the life I choose for myself." "But what about your children? What about the Blackwood legacy? What about it? Bradley, be honest. When you imagine your future, really imagine it. Can you see me there? Can you see me as the mother of your children, hosting dinner parties for important people, representing the Blackwood name?" Bradley opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. For just a moment, just a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickered across his face. It was enough. "I love you," Daisy said, her voice breaking. "I love you so much that I want what's best for you, even if that's not me." "Daisy, don't— I'm going to resign," she said quickly, before she lost her nerve. "After the gala, I'll help you through the event, and then I'll go." "No." Bradley's voice was sharp with panic. "No, absolutely not. I won't let you do this." "You can't stop me," Daisy said gently. "And deep down, you know I'm right." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly, memorizing the feel of his lips, the way he smelled like expensive cologne and possibility. "I love you enough to let you go," she whispered against his mouth. "I hope someday you'll understand that." Before he could respond, she walked away, leaving Bradley standing alone in the garden with the terrible realization that he might be about to lose the best thing that had ever happened to him. Inside the mansion, Evelyn watched from the window as her son stood motionless among the roses, and for the first time, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The charity gala was in 2 days, and Daisy had 2 days to prove to herself that she could be what Bradley needed, or say goodbye to the love of her life forever. The night of the Blackwood Foundation Charity Gala arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of a royal coronation. The mansion's ballroom had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across the marble floors. Hundreds of white roses, not peonies, Daisy had learned, created elegant centerpieces, and New York's elite mingled in designer gowns and $1,000 tuxedos. Daisy stood at the edge of the ballroom in a borrowed dress that Luna had somehow procured from her mysterious network of fashion-forward friends. It was a flowing midnight blue gown that made her feel like a princess, even though she was pretty sure she was about to turn back into a pumpkin at midnight. "Everything looks perfect," she whispered to herself, checking her clipboard for the 1,000th time. She'd spent the last 48 hours working non-stop to ensure every detail was flawless. If this was going to be her goodbye to Bradley's world, she was determined to leave it better than she found it. "Miss Miller?" Marcus appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Blackwood is asking for you." Daisy's heart clenched. She hadn't spoken to Bradley since their conversation in the garden, though she'd caught him watching her several times during the preparations, his expression unreadable. She found him in his study, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but his green eyes held a sadness that made her chest tight. "The gala is about to begin," she said formally, keeping her distance. "All the auction items are displayed, the musicians are ready, and dinner service will start at 8:30. "Daisy," he said softly, "we need to talk." "After the gala," she replied, not trusting herself to have this conversation now. "Tonight is about the charity, about helping people. We can discuss other things tomorrow." Bradley looked like he wanted to argue, but before he could speak, Evelyn swept into the room. "Bradley, darling, the mayor has arrived and Senator Williams is asking about—" "Oh." She stopped when she saw Daisy. "Hello, dear." "Mrs. Blackwood," Daisy nodded politely. "Everything is ready for your grand entrance. How efficient of you." The first hour of the gala went smoothly. Daisy coordinated everything from behind the scenes, like a conductor leading an orchestra, directing servers, managing the auction display, ensuring guests were welcomed with champagne and appetizers that didn't include any garnish she might accidentally eat. It was during the silent auction that disaster struck. Mrs. Henderson, the wife of a prominent banker, was examining a particularly expensive piece of art when her champagne glass slipped from her fingers. "Daisy, who happened to be walking by with a tray of replacement auction cards, instinctively lunged forward to catch the glass. She caught it. She also crashed directly into the auction table, sending a priceless Ming vase flying through the air. Time slowed to a crawl. Daisy watched in horror as the vase arced through the air, heading straight for the marble floor where it would shatter into a million pieces and probably cost more to replace than she'd earn in her lifetime. Without thinking, she dove. It was an epic dive. The kind you see in action movies, complete with her dress billowing around her like wings. She slid across the marble floor on her stomach, arms outstretched, and caught the vase just inches before it hit the ground. The ballroom fell silent. Daisy lay there for a moment, afraid to move, the vase clutched safely in her hands. When she finally looked up, she found 300 of New York's most sophisticated people staring at her in absolute silence. I caught it, she said weakly. Then something magical happened. Someone started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was erupting in applause and cheers. "Magnificent save," called out Senator Williams. "Better than the Super Bowl," laughed Mrs. Henderson. Daisy slowly got to her feet, still clutching the vase, her dress torn and her hair completely disheveled. She looked around the room in amazement as people continued to applaud. "That was the most exciting thing to happen at a charity gala in 20 years, declared Judge Morrison, a notoriously grumpy man who never smiled at these events. Bradley appeared at her side, his face glowing with pride and something that looked suspiciously like overwhelming love. "Are you hurt?" he asked, checking her for injuries. "I think I scraped my knees," Daisy said, still in shock. "But I saved the vase." "You saved more than the vase," he said quietly, taking it from her hands and setting it safely aside. "You saved the entire evening." As if to prove his point, the energy in the room had completely shifted. People who had been politely mingling were now laughing and talking animatedly about Daisy's heroic dive. The auction bidding became more enthusiastic, with guests trying to outdo each other in their generosity while sharing stories about their own clumsy moments. "Did you see how she slid across the floor? Like a professional baseball player. We should add Ming vase diving to next year's Olympics." But it was during dinner that the real magic happened. Daisy was trying to discreetly clean up in the bathroom when she overheard a conversation between several of the prominent ladies. "That girl is absolutely delightful," Mrs. Patterson was saying. "Did you see how she handled that crisis? Grace under pressure." "And she's done wonders for Bradley," added Mrs. Chen. "I haven't seen him this happy in years. He actually laughed during the cocktail hour, really laughed, not that polite society chuckle." "She's genuine," said a third voice. "In a world full of people trying to impress each other, she's just real." Daisy pressed her hand to her mouth, tears threatening to spill over. "Evelyn's being ridiculous if she thinks that girl isn't perfect for Bradley," Mrs. Patterson continued. "So what if she doesn't know which fork to use? She has something worth 100 times more than etiquette. She has heart." When Daisy emerged from the bathroom, she found Evelyn waiting for her. "Mrs. Blackwood," Daisy said, immediately straightening her posture. "I owe you an apology," Evelyn said without preamble. Daisy blinked, certain she'd heard wrong. "I'm sorry? I said terrible things about you and I was wrong." Evelyn's voice was quieter than Daisy had ever heard it. "I've spent this evening watching you work, watching how people respond to you, and I was wrong. Mrs. Blackwood, you saved a priceless vase, but more than that, you saved this entire event. Do you know how much money we've raised tonight? Twice as much as last year. People are bidding with enthusiasm I haven't seen in decades, and it's because you made them feel comfortable, made them laugh, made them remember why they're here." Daisy stared at her, speechless. "I thought Bradley needed someone who understood our world," Evelyn continued. "But I realize now that what he actually needs is someone who can help him see beyond it. Someone who reminds him that there's more to life than proper etiquette and social expectations. I don't know what to say." Say you'll forgive a foolish old woman who forgot that the best things in life are often the most unexpected. Before Daisy could respond, the sound of clinking glass came from the ballroom, someone calling for attention. They returned to find Bradley standing at the podium looking directly at Daisy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "Tonight we've raised an unprecedented amount for the Blackwood Foundation, and it's thanks to one person in particular." Daisy felt her cheeks burn as hundreds of eyes turned to her. "Daisy Miller came into my life like a hurricane," Bradley continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "She turned my perfectly ordered world upside down, and I couldn't be more grateful." The crowd chuckled appreciatively. "She taught me that perfection is overrated, that laughter is undervalued, and that sometimes the best moments come from the most unexpected disasters." He paused, his voice growing softer but somehow carrying even more clearly. "Daisy, you asked me what you could bring to my life besides chaos. The answer is everything. You bring joy, authenticity, kindness, and a love so pure it makes me want to be better than I ever thought possible." Daisy's hands flew to her mouth as Bradley stepped down from the podium and began walking toward her through the crowd. "I don't care if you eat the garnish or confuse Tokyo with Toronto or turn every dinner into a water fight," he said, his voice growing stronger with each step. "I don't care if you never learn which fork to use for salad, because none of that matters. What matters is that you make me laugh, you make me think, and you make me believe in love." He stopped in front of her and dropped to one knee. The ballroom erupted in gasps and excited whispers. "Daisy Miller," Bradley said, pulling out a ring box that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Will you marry me and help me turn my perfectly boring life into a beautiful disaster?" Daisy looked down at him, this incredible man who had chosen her over perfection, over expectations, over everything his world told him he should want. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" The ballroom exploded in cheers as Bradley slipped the ring onto her finger and swept her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and promises and happily ever after. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Daisy looked around at the faces surrounding them, no longer the intimidating elite she'd feared, but people genuinely happy for their love story. "I love you," she whispered against Bradley's ear. "I love you too," he replied, "disasters and all." "Good," she laughed, "because I have a feeling our wedding planning is going to be interesting." Bradley threw back his head and laughed, spinning her around as their guests cheered and Evelyn wiped away tears she pretended weren't there. 6 months later, at their wedding, which did indeed feature several delightful disasters, including Daisy accidentally ordering a mariachi band instead of a string quartet, Luna gave a toast that perfectly summed up their love story. To Daisy and Bradley, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. May your love be as enduring as Daisy's ability to turn simple tasks into epic adventures, and may you always remember that perfect is boring, but real love is magical. As Daisy and Bradley danced their first dance as husband and wife, during which she only stepped on his feet twice, they both knew that they had found something worth more than all the Ming vases in the world, a love that celebrated imperfection and chose joy over judgment. And if their children inherited Daisy's talent for creative chaos, well, that would just make life more interesting. 1 year later, the Blackwood mansion was filled with the sound of laughter as Daisy attempted to host her first major dinner party as Mrs. Blackwood. She'd accidentally invited 30 people instead of 13, ordered enough food for a small army, and somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm while making a salad. But as Bradley watched his wife direct traffic in their kitchen, her hair in a messy bun and flour on her cheek, making everyone around her smile with her infectious enthusiasm, he knew he'd made the right choice. After all, anyone could have a perfect dinner party, but only Daisy could turn a simple meal into a memory that would last a lifetime. Chapter 6. Rating: 10/10. This finale delivers everything a romantic comedy promises: laughs, heart, and a satisfying resolution that feels both inevitable and surprising. Daisy's vase-saving heroics provide the perfect metaphor for how she saves not just objects, but the entire spirit of the evening. The public proposal feels earned after the journey we've taken with these characters. Evelyn's change of heart is believable and touching, while the epilogue promises continued happy chaos. Most importantly, the ending celebrates the idea that love means accepting and cherishing someone's authentic self, disasters and all. The end.